What was it like when you first got drafted? Like, how did you feel?
Well, I was glad to go because a lot of all my friends, almost all my friends were in the service, and my brother was married, had 2 kids, and another uh, son-in-law or brother-in-law, not son-in-law, brother-in-law. He had guess about 3 or 4 children too, and I just thought, boy, if something happened to them and I wasn't in, I'd have really kind of felt my nerve, you know. So I had to, in fact, I could have probably stayed out because of the work I did. I was down at Martin's Aircraft, and we made the B-26 bomber.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah, for the Army. And I don't remember the number, I think something like 183 or something that they made for Great Britain too.
John Rittle was born March 6, 1922 in the town of Lebanon, Pennsylvania. He was drafted into the U.S. Army and served from March 27, 1944 to May 20, 1946. He was honorably discharged from the military and never was injured in combat. Before Mr. Rittle was drafted, he took shop class in high school. Before the war, he worked as a mechanic. He built B-26 bombers at Martin's Aircraft. With this work, he did exceptional work as a Class 4 mechanic, but was not able to do the fighting that he wanted to. He moved to Maryland to sign up for the draft. He signed up, and Mr. Rittle had no place to live. At one time, Mr. Rittle was living in a boarding house in Maryland because basically he had no place to live. That very same boarding house is the same place where they took in draftees. Before the Army took him in, Mr. Rittle had taken a lot of medical and physical examinations. He was not in the barracks very long before he was taken into a classroom to take a special placement test for the military. And the outcome was that he was to become a combat technician. Then later that day, an officer came up to him, told him to pack up his stuff, and that he was to be shipped to Fort Dix, New Jersey. He was given a ticket and a meal coupon from the train ride there. He was told that he was going to be met by soldiers that were waiting for him when he got off the train. Just like the soldier had told him, as he got off the train, 2 soldiers came up to him, took him in his Jeep, and they drove to Fort Dix, New Jersey. The next morning, they all called for roll call. Everyone in camp was called once again. Mr. Rittle was being singled out. The officer said to Mr. Rittle that they will have to give him a separate training because the company that he was to serve was only formed 2 weeks ago. The reason he was pulled out during roll call was because the company he served in needed a total of 200 men. They only had 199 in the entire company. One man did not show up, so Mr. Rittle was the main replacement for that man. While serving in Europe throughout, Mr. Rittle also acquired some new friends throughout training. His best friend was Italian, who was about his size, which isn't very big, according to his CO. He was not to go anywhere by himself because he could jeopardize himself and everyone else in his company, but not traveling with others. Mr. Rittle never got to know a whole lot of the 199 men in his company, but he learned to know the men in his barracks. Along with making friends and observing the interesting war news, he also had to do his job. Mr. Rittle was a T1 technician when he originally started his life as a technician. But when the war ended, he was ranked as a Class 4 combat technician. Mr. Rittle worked on everything from tankers to jeeps, all the way up to full-blown M1 Sherman tanks. Mr. Rittle never actually got into any physical combat during World War II, but consistently moving with his unit around Europe during the war. However, once the war was over, Mr. Rittle was traveling to many different countries and places and learned quite a bit. Just about every country in Europe, there was about 20 years behind the Americans with technology and their ultimate ways of living. Mr. Rittle got to discover what it was like to live in the average European household. In France, people still mainly relied on horses and bicycles as their main source of transportation to get around. villages and towns. Mr. Riddle traveled afar to the United Kingdom, to France, and Germany. He went to see the end of the war in Europe and to come back home. Upon arrival home, soldiers were often treated rather well, although he recalls how hard of a time GIs had finding jobs when they returned to the States. Overall, Mr. Riddle was a very fortunate man not to be harmed in the European conflict. He gained a lot of knowledge and is very good experience.